Two great guests here that are coming to talk to us about how the school is doing, our school system is doing. So why don't you introduce yourself, Dr. Register? I think people know who you are. Let me see if I can turn this on.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I think I know everyone here. I'm Jesse Register, Director of Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools, and I have with me Dr. Paul Changus, who is Director of our Testing and Accountability and Research Department. So we're glad to be here with you this evening.
Thank you. What we're going to do is they're going to be doing their presentation, and if you can let them go through the presentation, then at the end we'll have some questions from the crowd, from the council people. So any questions about the process? No? Okay. Dr. Register.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be really short with my introduction and just say Dr. Changus has been running our Testing and Accountability Division for a number of years now, and he's really one of the experts in the state, and we look forward to sharing this year's data with you. The data is actually, most of it's pretty old. It's been released for some period of time, but the state report card just came out. The final pieces of this just came out, so we'll look forward to sharing this data with you at this time. Dr. Changus.
Is this mic on? Can you hear me okay?
It should be on.
Can you guys hear? Can you hear me okay? No. No. Let me try the other mic. Okay, I'm going to go through the accountability information, and just as a brief reminder with regard to our new accountability system in Tennessee. Last year we moved away from No Child Left Behind and went to a new accountability system that is focused on all students making improvement every year. There are targets that are set for each school and for each school district in terms of overall growth, generally in the neighborhood of 4 percentage points or so per year, which is pretty significant. And also closing the achievement gap annually. Those achievement gap targets are set for us based on our lowest achieving students making greater gains. That's based on ethnicity, our students with disability, our English learners, and our economically disadvantaged students. And we will look at data in just a second. So we have two overriding targets. And our results for this past year, first, in terms of achievement targets in reading and mathematics and graduation rate, we had 7 targets or annual measurable objectives set for us by the state, and we hit 7 of those. Under the new accountability system, we have to hit the majority of targets, which we did. One of the targets we did not make was our graduation rate target, but that was based on data from 2011. There's a 1-year lag in the graduation rate reporting as we have to get those summer graduates in. We'll look at the newest graduation rate in a little while. The good news is we made our 2012 target, which will be applied for next year. The other target is based on narrowing the achievement gap, and we didn't hit our gap closure targets. However, all of our subgroups made progress in the majority of areas, and that's significant because that's a requirement for us to fall into what's called the intermediate category rather than a category of being in need of improvement. So we moved into the intermediate category. There were 16% of school districts in Tennessee that were above us, that were exemplary, that hit both the growth targets and the gap closure targets. So only about 1/6 of the school systems in Tennessee. We fell into this middle category where 42% of the districts were. And then there are 42% that fell below us, primarily because of gap closure issues and the fact that they did not move all of their subgroups in the right direction. There were subgroups that declined. If you want to see how our history is in terms of district status, as you are well aware, under No Child Left Behind, we had fallen into more serious categories of corrective action and restructuring in recent years. And we're one of 2 districts that had reached that status. In 2012-13, with this new accountability system, and the reason, as you probably are well aware from all of the attention from the Governor and Commissioner of Education that we moved away from No Child Left Behind as the targets were getting successively higher, that virtually all districts in Tennessee were headed to a path of being in school improvement or beyond. Now, as I said, we're in that intermediate category with 16% of districts above us and 42% below us. With regard to actual performance, our scores over the last 2 years, this is grades 3 through 8 based on our TCAP test, have gone up significantly in all 3 subjects that are aligned with the new achievement standards in Tennessee. We've seen an 8% improvement over the last 2 years in reading language arts, about a 12.5% improvement in mathematics, and an 8% improvement in science, and that's across grades 3 through 8. At the high school level on our Algebra 1 end of course test, and this is just looking at the high school data, not counting our middle school algebra students who tend to be some of our highest achieving. We've seen great progress in Algebra 1, a 13% improvement, but we've only made modest improvement, about 1.5 percentage points in English 2, and that's an area that we're targeting. When you start looking at the subgroup data, and this is a pretty busy graph, what you have are 3 years of reading language arts scores across grades 3 through 8 for all students. And now in the new accountability system, every child who takes a test is part of our data. Under No Child Left Behind, we were accountable just for those students who were with us the entire year, but all scores are part of this now. But our ethnic subgroups are white, Hispanic, black, Asian, and then our economically disadvantaged students, our free reduced lunch, students with disabilities, any child with an IEP other than our gifted students, and then our limited English proficient students, which are our active English learners, plus what we call our transition students who have received service within the last 2 years and are transitioning to the regular classroom. The good news is all subgroups have made pretty significant progress over the last 2 years. But as you see, all groups are moving fairly comparably, which is why we're not closing the gap, but we are moving students upward. Similar trends in mathematics, actually even higher gains than we saw in reading, but again, all students moving upward at a pretty significant pace. This is 3 through 8 again. At the high school level, in Algebra 1, we're seeing improvement that's pretty significant for all students and for most of our subgroups. The exceptions being only modest improvements with our students with disabilities over the last 2 years. But these are students with disabilities who are in the regular Algebra 1 courses. And the other high school subject we're accountable for is English 2. This is the one where I mentioned we had just modest improvement, and that's pretty flat for most subgroups. We have seen a decline with our Asian students. The population of our Asian students has changed a bit over the last couple of years, with a higher percentage being economically disadvantaged as well. And let me just mention, as I'm sure you are aware, these are not mutually exclusive categories, and several of our students, a large percentage, will be in multiple categories. In fact, our English learners or limited English proficient students, about 96% of them are also economically disadvantaged. We have a writing assessment. Students respond to a prompt in grades 5, 8, and 11. This assessment's been in place for many years. This graph goes all the way back to 2003 when writing assessment started in Tennessee in the mid-1990s. We were seeing proficiency rates or competency rates less than 30% in most grade levels. We've now climbed to 91% at the 11th grade, and that was 70% just 8 years ago. We're at 90% in grade 8 and 81% in grade 5, but it's been a pretty steady incline. And the good news is that we're seeing these increases even though the writing assessment is no longer part of our state accountability system. That will change as we move into the Common Core standards, and writing is going to be a greater part of our assessment process. Children will be required to explain how they got their answers rather than just taking multiple choice tests. This is also a busy graph, but it's our graduation rate. If you look at the far left at the all category, that's our percentage of students graduating on time with a regular diploma. And in 2010, up until 2010, we had 5 years for our English learners and students with disabilities to graduate on time. Beginning with the 2010-11 school year, the state policy changed, and we only had 4 years for all students to graduate on time, 4 years and a summer. That greatly impacts our English learners and students with disabilities who typically need additional time to get that regular diploma. So we saw a decline from 2010 to 2011 after a steep increase in 2010. The good news is that our grad rate went up again last year, up to 78.4% overall, and that's higher than we were with a 5-year rate up until 2009. So we've exceeded it by 5%. And you see that all of our subgroups have made progress over time, with the exception of that change in formula. Females are outperforming males in terms of graduation rate by about 9.5 percentage points. The gap between our black students and white students is less than 3 percentage points, and both subgroups have made progress. And our Hispanic students have made significant progress. And as good as this looks, when you go back just a few years to when we started NCLB in 2004, the increase we've seen is really tremendous. We were at 58% back in 2004 in terms of 5-year graduation rate. These are our average ACT scores as a district in blue, in Tennessee in orange, and then the Hope Scholarship in red. 21 on the composite is required to be eligible for the Hope Scholarship. What we see here is a little bit of an increase for both the district and the state. We actually showed a greater increase. Our average ACT score is 18.4, not where we want it, but it has come up. And the last 3 years, 2010, 11, and 12, were the 3 years that every student in Tennessee is now required to take a college entrance exam. Up until 2009, at that point, it was only students who wished to take the test. So we were generally talking about our college-ready students who were on track and interested in going to college. So we added typically our lower performing students in 2010 across the state, which is why we saw a decline for the entire state. Our increase last year was 0.3 of a percentage point, 0.3 of a point on the ACT scale, which exceeded the state growth. Across subject areas, we saw 2 to 4/10 of a point improvement. The state saw 1 or 2/10 improvement across subject areas. And I'll add that the ACT is probably the hardest thing to move because it is an accumulation of performance over a number of years. And we did a study last year looking at our TCAP scores from 3rd grade, following a cohort of our graduates through the ACT exam, found that you could predict 75% of the variation in ACT scores by those 3rd grade math scores. There's a strong relationship that's hard to break. These are our value-added scores for the district in grades 4 through 8. The TVOS system, as I'm sure you know, is the original statewide value-added system in this country and has been adopted by a number of states across the country. What we saw in 2010, we moved to much more rigorous academic standards and saw negative scores compared to where we had been the previous year when the targets were set. This happened in our district. It happened across the state. Our scores generally mirrored what happened statewide. In reading, math, and science, those were the 3 areas with new academic standards. The standards didn't change in social studies, and those have been relatively flat with that transition. The good news is we bounced back the following year in 2011 and even higher in 2012 to the point where we actually now exceed the state in terms of growth by a little bit and have surpassed the target. 0 is our target. That means that our students would be making growth comparable to what's happening across the state at the time these targets are set, maintaining their ranking. And we're pleased with that progress. The value-added scores are also used at the classroom level for teacher evaluation and at the school level for principal and teacher evaluation. And speaking of the value-added process at the teacher level, this is a summary of our teacher effect data all through elementary, middle, and high school. If you look at the percentage of teachers who have level 5 scores, the dark green, in the subject areas that are tested, about a third of our teachers, 32.6%, are at this top level. They're significantly exceeding the state average. That's a little bit below the state, which is the pie chart on the right, 37%. But it's only a 4.5% difference. And then we're pretty comparable in the other areas, slightly higher at level 1. Level 3, the yellow, represents average effectiveness. Those are teachers whose students are making gains that's comparable to what's happening statewide. The concerns are the level 2, the level 1, where we're losing a little bit of ground. Fortunately, we see that the majority of teachers are at least a 3 or higher. The state in the new accountability system, the primary accountability is on the district level, but they also recognize schools for reward and for focus, which means that they have achievement gap issues, and also for priority status where they fall in the bottom 5% of the state. These are our reward schools, the schools that have been in the top 5% of the state in both achievement and growth. We have additional schools we'll see in a second that made it for one area. But these schools, Glendale, Head, Martin Luther King, Meigs, and Rose Park, both their test scores were in the top 5% and their growth was in the top 5%. And when value added first was implemented in Tennessee, we heard a lot of concerns that it was difficult to make growth if you were a high achieving school, but there are schools who have shown that that can be done. In terms of reward status for one area, the P represents performance or achievement. So these are schools that have scores in the top 5% statewide: Hume Fogg, Laughlin, Nashville School of the Arts, Percy Priest. And then the schools shown for growth: Bellshire, Hattie Cotton, DuPont, McGavick Elementary, New Vision Academy. Their gains, value-added gains, rank among the top 5% in Tennessee. The score prize was awarded to Rose Park Middle. There were only 3 schools in Tennessee awarded the score prize. This was the middle school winner for the tremendous progress they've made, academic growth in recent years. And that's a school that's 59% disadvantaged, 62% black. So we're very proud of the work they've done. And as you saw, they were one of the reward schools for both achievement and growth. When you look at our school status, compared to the percentage of the population our district represents, the numbers are pretty comparable. We have 8% of the state's students in public education. We had 8% of the reward schools, 14 of them. We had a little less than 8% of the focus schools, schools with achievement gaps, and a little less than 8%, 7% that fell into priority status. So we didn't have we weren't overrepresented in those categories, and we had one charter school that fell into each of these categories, a separate charter school in each of these. When you look at our population compared to the state, we have a significantly higher percentage of limited English proficient students. We have the largest population in the state at over 11,000. Economically disadvantaged, we're about 14 percentage points higher than the state. So we have greater challenges. We do have greater funding and thankfully greater funding at the local level to help meet those challenges. We have a higher percentage of students who are identified as highly qualified, which is based on the credentials of those teachers. Charter schools, we currently have 20, but as you know, that will drop by one next year. But we do have a significant number of charter schools. This shows when those schools came into existence in metro schools. There will be 20 next year, okay.
That's the 13. Yeah, you can see that this number includes those that will be opening in 2013, the 13-14 school year. There at the bottom, there are 4 of those, and then I think this year we are operating 14.
Common Core standards are being implemented as we speak. There's been a lot of training on these standards for our teachers in reading and mathematics. This is a tremendous transition in terms of curriculum, but it's one that I think will have great benefits in the future. We're talking about an internationally competitive set of standards in those areas. The majority of the country, 47 states, are implementing. These standards have greater depth. They're not as broad, but much deeper than we had in the past. That's been one of the learnings we've had as we've looked at high-performing nations on international assessments, that we do have a broader curriculum. The assessments that are going to go with these standards are going to be considerably different from what we've seen in the past, and eventually they will be all administered online rather than paper and pencil. We'll still have multiple choice testing at the end of the year, but during the year we're going to have assessments that will require students to respond to different types of prompts, explain how they got to that answer, more emphasis on problem solving and concepts and application. More computer simulation type problems that require students to apply those skills. Our challenge right now is implementing those standards while still being accountable, though, for the existing state standards. Advanced academics, we have 9 schools that are currently involved with International Baccalaureate Program, and Antioch High School is looking at the feasibility of joining those schools. We have a couple of high schools and I think 5 middle schools and 2 elementary schools that are involved with IB right now. A very challenging international curriculum. We offer high school credit, I believe, now in every middle school in the current year. And we're expanding our AP Scholars program from Hillwood to additional high schools. We have advanced placement student increases, more courses, more students. You see data from the last 3 years, from 2009-10 up to 2011-12. Not only did we have a larger number of students taking tests last year, 4,132 tested, which was up, but we also had a higher percentage. We're slightly under half of those getting a 3 or higher, which yields college credit. The good news is just taking those courses and taking those exams has been shown to raise student achievement. We have a Cambridge Scholars Program, which is an international program, diploma program that is in I think about 5 schools now. Whites Creek, for next year, Whites Creek, Cane Ridge, Overton, McGavock, and then the following year, Glencliff and Maplewood. ACT prep programs, getting students ready for the ACT, that college entrance exam. This is preparing students in a number of our high schools. Focus on literacy, which is, as you saw our English 2 scores, that's an area that we're working on a continuous improvement model to raise reading and literacy and English scores. It embeds those ATC standards, which are rigorous standards, into our daily content and gives children a chance to practice on those exams. And then we have a new GPA scale, instead of a 4-point, a 5-point scale, to encourage students who take those advanced courses to get credit for those courses rather than taking an easier route. So we've covered quite a bit of ground, and throw it open to questions for Dr. Register or myself.
Well, thank you very much. I think we have Council Lady Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for organizing this meeting. And thank you, Dr. Register and Dr. Changas. I've got a question. If you don't mind going back to the slide, the TCAP, you had 2 slides, I think, 3 through 8.
We'll get there.
Okay.
Do you want the subgroup or the previous?
Yeah, you can go to the previous one. That's okay. Perfect. Okay. The for 2012 in those areas, reading, math, science, what defines proficient and advanced?
The standard for proficiency is set by the State Department of Education. The assessments themselves, we're talking about the TCAP achievement test, an English language version of the test, which English simplified version that our English learners take. However, it's considered to be as rigorous as the regular TCAP. And then there's a modified academic achievement standard that's given to a small percentage of our students, those who are students with disabilities. The standard was set by bringing educators from across the state together about 4 years ago to look at the new state standards, the curriculum standards, and to define what grade level expectations were. Up until that time, we had standards in Tennessee, performance standards and academic standards that were among the lowest in the country. Some say they were probably the second lowest in the country. And we had proficiency rates that were over 80%. The new standards that were looked at that time, not only were they much more rigorous in content, but there was an expectation that they should be aligned to what's called the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is considered to be a very rigorous test that identifies whether students truly are career and college ready. They brought these subject area experts together from across the state to look at those standards and to identify what an advanced student should be able to do, someone above grade level, what a student who was on grade level should be able to do, a proficient student, based on the content. And then those numbers were run to determine what percentage of Tennessee students would fall into those categories. But it was based on content experts looking at data and going through an iterative process. What resulted was standards that rank now only below Massachusetts in terms of rigor. And honestly, as someone who worked at the state level for 12 years and the district for 15, I was surprised that we made the jump we did in Tennessee to the point where the majority of Tennessee students were no longer considered to be proficient. But it's also felt that students who were a little below that level, the basic level, are typically, well, that's where the average student in Tennessee is. There's a small deficit in terms of their learning, but they have not mastered the majority of skills that are considered to be grade level skills.
Okay, so is the TCAP scored on a 100 scale or a 200 scale or a 500 scale?
There are scale scores that...
And just speak, if you would, I know there's lots of subgroups, but just speak to the general population at this point.
Well, there are typically, they're in the neighborhood of 65 to 70 items on a reading or math test, and they're scored in terms of the number correct based on, that is converted to a scale score that ranges from, I believe it's from 400 to 800. But in terms of the number correct, typically a child has to get in the neighborhood of 60% or so of the items correct to be considered proficient.
So 60% or above is proficient advanced?
In that neighborhood. It varies a little bit by subject and by grade.
Okay. And then what's basic?
That'll range, and I will probably have to get back to you with the specific numbers, but it's going to, I think, probably be in the 40 to 60% range.
Okay, all right.
And again, these are pretty challenging content items compared to what we had in Tennessee previously.
Okay, okay.
So good questions. I might add a point. Essentially, you've got with this a cut score. The state determines.
And are those cut scores public information? Could we just get?
Yeah, they are, and
okay.
so this is these numbers are the percentage of students that fall above the cut score. We've actually, Paul has talked to the state about doing something a little more complete than that. One score, one cut score. You worry about our 58% that fall below and the 42% that fall above. How do you measure different gradations of that? How do we take into account those that fall in the very high range or those that fall in the very low range? And the fact is, until you make the cut score, you're not, according to this accountability system, showing progress. So I wish the state would do something to further refine that, and we've talked to them about maybe 4 scores and compiling that, but to this point in time, they haven't done it.
Well, and that's why I'm asking the question, because it's you know, for data geeks like me, it's a very, you know, amorphous. It doesn't feel specific enough, but
we can provide you the percentage of students who are at each level, below basic, proficient, and advanced. The method Dr. Register mentioned, we're developing what we're calling an academic performance framework to look at performance of our schools over time. And we are using an improvement model that is looking at each of those levels, because we want to make sure that we aren't narrowly focused on just moving kids from just below that cut score to just above. We want to make sure that advanced students are being pushed to stay advanced and so forth.
So could you give me the cut scores for 12, 11, and 10, and then the scores distributed within those ranges?
Yes, we can.
Oh, that'd be great.
That would be by grade level.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then go to the end of course. I sort of have a similar line of questioning on the end of course.
Council lady?
Oh, do I need to give up my turn?
I'm okay if everybody else is okay, but
okay.
I have a full queue of
I can go. Here, you call on somebody else.
Okay. Council Lady Moore? Thank you, Council Lady.
I'm sorry, Council Lady.
I'll be brief, Council Lady Evans, and I'll refer back to you. But two or three questions. On the recent closing of Smith Craighead Middle, do you have the data on that? I didn't see it up there. I know that you all have made a decision to close that. Is there a possibility we could get that data? And my second question is, I heard you talk about, I've heard it from some other students, they are taking the ACT scores that are required. I've heard students talk about that, but are they taught to that test, or how often can they take it? Or do they have to, once they are required to take it, then they have to pay for it again to take it, or what is the procedure? Yeah, I know I asked 2 questions.
The state pays for it one time, so if a student wants to take it, and it's offered multiple times, it's probably 4 or 5 times a year that they would have a chance to take it. But that would be at their own expense if they wanted to take it additionally. And I would have to check on the cost of the school. I know the AP exam is $89. This is a little less than that, but I'll have to check. I'll have to check the cost, 60 or so.
Okay, so Metro schools do not offer any kind of required training for the students to, I mean, when I say training, to help them to try to pass the ACT.
Not a required, but I did have a slide that mentioned we do have ACT prep classes at a number of our high schools. That's something students sign up for.
Okay.
But in the state, generally, most of the students now take it in March of their junior year. That's when the state has an opportunity to take it at school. So that's when most take it, but if they miss that opportunity, they get a voucher to take it at another time.
Okay. One more. I saw where I had 2 schools, Rose Park and National School of Arts. They were reward schools. I want to know how they rewarded. Maybe I'm not understanding. How are they rewarded?
There's not a financial reward, but it's recognition for their outstanding performance. I don't believe we.
Okay.
Well, actually, I think there is a small financial reward for reward schools from the state directly that I think is a teacher bonus. If I'm not, I stand to be corrected on that. I don't know how much it is, but there is a reward for that. But they're just designated as reward schools. It's quite an accomplishment. You ask about Smithson Craighead. Smithson Craighead has been in the Achievement School District. It's one of the lowest 5% in terms of student performance in the state. And the state law actually says that for schools that are in the Achievement School District and don't make progress, that they should be closed. We've been following the data, and this is just the middle school. We've been following that data. It was our lowest performing school of all, and actually one of the lowest performing schools in the state of Tennessee. You may have a question about timing on that, and the reason we encourage the board and recommended the board to go ahead and take action now is because November is the month when all of our parents have an opportunity to make choices for next year, when they get in the lotteries, when they sign up for the choices. And actually, as we sit here tonight, there is a meeting at Smithson Craighead with parents and Mr. Coverstone, and I think some of our pupil assignment people, Chris Weber, to actually let the parents see what their choices are and help them get in the selection process for next year so that they're not left out.
Thank you. Councilman Tiger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of your slides talked about the funding mechanisms, and I think it showed Metro's proportion was 55.7%, which I believe has steadily increased over time. Does that number worry you in any way? And if so, why? And why are we so much higher than surrounding counties and other systems?
Well, it worries me, but it also gives me great pride in the fact that you and the mayor and the local government step up and say you want the good schools, and that's greatly appreciated by all of our teachers and other people and parents, and particularly our community. But it's based on a pretty complicated formula, the per pupil amount that we get from the state, the greater capacity of a local district to raise funds, the less amount we receive from the state. And I think we are, you see that our percentage there now is...
Go back and say what you said. The greater our
capacity,
taxing capacity, basically, or...
Yes, per pupil wealth. There's a formula that identifies the tax value per pupil, and then the greater that capacity, the greater the capacity of Davidson County to fund, the less amount we receive from the state. So
we consider a greater capacity than Williamson County?
Yes. We are probably second in the state, and I have not seen the state ranking. We typically fall right below either Oak Ridge or Sevier County in the per pupil valued wealth for the county. So we receive less.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Council Lady Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Bettany. Again, I always talked about the ACT scores, and this concerns me still, that we're still around that level, because that basically says that our students are not college ready. And are there any partnerships? I know when I was on the board, before I left, we were talking about some of the colleges here being able to partner in providing more testing opportunities for students at a younger age, and more so around like the 8th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade time frame. Because again, 11th grade is too late. In my view. So what are you all doing to develop some partnerships where some of those monies are funded through partnerships where the fee is absorbed through other means, whether that's through private donations or through universities, so that these students can get more of an opportunity to practice so that these scores can increase?
Well, the two things that we're doing that I think will show pretty quick benefits are that our students are doing two prep programs called two prep tests called PLAN, P-L-A-N, and Explore, and we're really we have ACT prep classes that are now being offered in preparation programs that are being offered in a number of our schools. It's not district-wide yet. Not specifically responding to your question, but let me point out one thing on the chart. From 2009 to 2010, you'll see that the drop in the state and the drop in Davidson County mirror each other. That was the year that we went to required mandatory ACT tests for all students. So, Paul, I can't remember what our percentage of students tested before that was, but it was about 70%. About 70%. So one thing that we're really paying attention to now that I think is very important is that now we are asking students to take the ACT who aren't planning to go to college. And so we want to make sure that there's a motivation for that. Some of the factors that relate greatest to improving ACT scores is what courses they take, what's the rigor of those courses, do they get those academic courses in before they actually take the test. We've changed our GPA rating system so that students get a weighted grade point average if they take advanced courses, and I think the most direct way to improve ACT scores, but it's got to be over time. Remember, Paul said that there's a direct correlation between third grade math scores and ACT scores. That's a long time from one to the other. We've got to work on that. We've got to diagnose third grade scores, and we've got to build a program to get kids from third grade through ACT. That I think is very important. But we're also wanting to really look at the rigor of the courses that students take and encourage students to take the academic courses before they take the ACT. We haven't done a lot with specifically what you're asking about, looking for funding, but to take the ACT more than one time, what we're really focusing on right now is motivation for that first time so that all of our students really attend to that test and try to do their best on it and take it at the right time.
Well, you know, as of course I've always said in the past that, you know, children in more wealthier areas like the Green Hills area and some of the other areas, their parents start them earlier in the 7th and 8th grade and earlier at Kaplan, which is very expensive to be able to take those tests through them. But I just think that you all need to explore some more partnerships or something, because that score is not increasing, and it's a concern.
Okay, if I could add one thing, and it is something that has to start early, and I'm in complete agreement there. A couple things that help us. One was the move to higher academic standards in 2009-10, but now with Common Core, what we have are much more rigorous standards that are much better aligned to the ACT curriculum than we had in the past. We're also paying more attention to those ACT scores. They're becoming indicators that we're using in that academic performance framework that I mentioned. It's something that we report to our stakeholders on a routine basis. But we also have data now that we didn't used to have electronically from the value-added system that we now put into our data warehouse that has projections from as early as the 3rd grade to where that child, what that child's likelihood of scoring a 21 on the ACT score is years down the road based on the current trajectory. This beginning this fall, we put that into a data warehouse that every teacher in our school system now has access to start paying attention to that data and hopefully remediating well in advance.
Well, in closing, I want 2 pieces of data from your slideshow. The 6 schools that are priority schools, can I get a listing of those, and the 1 charter that's considered in the priority category? Also, I would like a copy of the charter school growth chart that was up there. Also, Lead Prep Southeast was mentioned up there, that's coming online. Is that in Southeast Davidson County? And if so, I need some information on that. And the AP Scholars, where is this being expanded? I need that information too. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Stites.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. One of the slides talking about the value-added teacher effectiveness summary, I think we had 32% in level 1, or level 5 rather. One, how does that compare charter school to I guess, non-charter schools? Is there any difference? And 2, I guess we can talk about test scores and all these other things, but for the things that are within the school board's purview, this seems like the one that affects student scores the most. Is there anything that, as a council, we can do? And I'm thinking of the budget this past year and raising teaching salaries, that kind of thing.
Good questions. I don't know this data on the charter schools. I don't know how we compare to the charter schools. Paul, do you have that?
I can tell, and I don't have it in terms of percentage of teachers. I know in terms of school level value added, on average, I think it's pretty comparable, but it's from one extreme to the other. We have schools with excellent gains and some that were below the state, but we can get that kind of information together.
But I think to the point that you're making, we need to deal with the red zone, and the red mark, the red zone are the ones that score the worst on their teacher evaluation system and this particular chart on their value-added system. So what one thing that we're doing as a district is looking school by school at how teacher evaluation compares, how principals rate teachers compared to what value-added looks like, to see if the principals are rating teachers appropriately. If you've got a low-performing teacher in terms of student achievement as a principal, dealing with that effectively. We, in our iZone schools, which are our lowest performing schools, we've set a standard for next year that there will be no level 1 or 2 teachers teaching in those schools. And the principals have that expectation now. They had that expectation last summer and have to deal with those low-performing teachers in the lowest performing schools that we have. The goal, of course, is to build quality faculties in those schools that are struggling the most, to make sure that we have all good teachers. We're investing many resources in the development of teachers and in the development of leaders. We want our principals to be expert observers and coaches. We want our principals to be able to go into a classroom and nail it. We want them to know if it's a good classroom or not. If it's not a good classroom, we want them to know why. If it is a good classroom, we want them to coach those teachers to be better and to help other teachers. So we're really focusing on that. Find best practice and spread it. Have those great teachers communicate with other teachers, collaborate, and help them learn how to do that too, and to hold every principal accountable for dealing effectively with those low-performing teachers. If we do those 2 things, then we'll see that red zone reduce significantly. made great changes in that this year. We've eliminated a lot of teachers that were falling in that red zone. And quite frankly, the less you hear about it publicly, the more successful we are. It should not, we should coach people out of the job if they can't do the job. We should counsel people out of the jobs, not have to go through a public spectacle to do that. And our people are getting better with that. We feel good about where our principals are and the other people who do evaluations in the district.
In the low-performing schools where you're trying to not have level 1 and level 2 teachers, where do those teachers go? Are they going to another school, or are they leaving the system? The standard for all principals is you got to deal with your own problems. We're not going to move problems from place to place. That's my expectation of all of our principals, and I'll hold them accountable for that. So tenure.
That is a culture change.
If a teacher has tenure and they're a level 1 or level 2 teacher, what's the system's options?
Well, the options are that they should find other work, retire, move out, or that they improve their quality of instruction to the point where they're not a level 1 or level 2 in terms of their test scores and also in terms of their performance. That's a change that takes a period of time. We've been talking about that and working on that for the last couple of years, and we feel like we're to a place now where we will really be able to hold people accountable to that standard.
Just one final thing. I think one of the first questions was, is there anything that we can do to help the system get better equipped teachers? And if that is increased pay, and if that's, yeah. I know I am adamantly opposed to any increased taxes, but that's one of the things that would drag me towards that, is knowing that we're doing something to improve the classroom that much.
I want to say how much I appreciate the increase in revenue that we received this year. And one of the key pieces, one of the key strategies of implementation that we used was to significantly raise beginning teacher pay. We went from, I think, about 37th in the state, ranking 37th in beginning pay, to 3rd. And we used a strategy to do that. We just cut the bottom 5 years off the incremental salary schedule. So for the first 5 years, you make the same thing. With a BA or BS, you make $40,000 a year. Just the rumor of that last year, because of the tax increase, of course, this was adopted, the budget was set after most of our teachers were hired for this year. Just the rumor of that made a tremendous difference in the recruitment strategies that we had this year. My conversations with folks like Teach for America and the New Teacher Project is we've now become much more competitive with Atlanta and Houston and those other places, and we literally compete with them for teachers. We've become much more competitive. My expectation is that you're going to give us the best, and we've said that to our local colleges and universities where we recruit a lot of our people. So this year, my expectation is we're going to hire earlier, and we're going to have a much better quality applicant pool, and it's going to be more diverse. That's another issue that we've got to deal with, is we don't have as diverse a faculty as we would like to have. And I think it's going to pay tremendous benefits as we go forward. In terms of differentiated pay, and you'll hear me talk about this, and it's not going to be, this is not a pre-pitch for a budget change or anything like that, because it won't be as hard to do as you might imagine. But the other thing that we want to do is compress our salary schedule. We took the first 5 years off, so now the beginning pay is what was pay for a 6-year teacher, and everybody in the gap there makes the $40,000. We want to compress the top so that you get to the top of the schedule faster. That's lifetime earnings for people. That's a real hook into getting people to stay with us over time, the good ones to stay with us. And we can do that in part by the fact that we're saving on inflation. When we don't have to make those salary increases for the first 5 years, we can use some of those funds to apply to compressing that salary at the top a little bit, so that you get to the top in 15 years, not 25. We're going to look at that. And then a third piece that's really important. There could be a fourth piece, but we're not there yet. The third piece is role differentiation. If we ask people to be leaders, if we give teachers extra responsibilities, if we ask them to be department chair or network leads or folks who help other people improve practice, then we ought to differentiate pay. We ought to give them more pay if we're asking them to do more. There's a fourth piece, and that's pay for performance. But frankly, we're not there yet. Teachers don't trust the evaluation system yet to the point of saying that if I make X score on my value-added scores, I ought to make more money. I think we might get there, but I don't think we're there yet. So role differentiation is important in getting those salaries up there. Let me tell you, and our folks have heard me say this will never be the easiest place to work, but it can be the best place to work, and I firmly believe that. If we put a support system in place, if we pay good salaries, and we develop people when they come on board, you're going to see a huge turnaround in this district in a very short period of time. Sorry, I didn't mean to preach, but it was a good question.
Thank you. Thank you. The next is going to be Council Lady Gilmore and then Council Lady Evans. But before we get there, I wanted to say thank you to Council Lady Evans and for asking for this information, and also for the school board for agreeing to come here today. If the committee has other subjects that would like to learn about, please let me know. I'm sure the school will be, MMPS will be accommodating to come and share with us. And the same goes to the audience. If there is anybody at this time watching on Channel 3, shoot me an email and let me know what you will be interested in learning, and we'll use this forum to bring more information. I'm sure the school board is very interested in sharing with the community. Council Lady.
Thank you, Chair Bettany, and I would like to thank Dr. Register and Dr. Changas for coming. I think I just had maybe 2 questions. Is once you get those TCAP scores, since they're at the end of the year, how do you take that information and apply it to the kids for the next year? That's the first question.
It's one snapshot, and we have interim benchmark assessments we give 3 times a year prior to TCAP that are highly predictive of performance on that TCAP score that teachers are using from September when we give the tests, and we get results back usually within a couple of weeks. Through the last interim benchmark is typically given in February, 1st of March, right before TCAP. All of that should be part of a continuous evaluation of student performance. But that data goes back to teachers. TCAP scores will be there when teachers return in the fall. It's part of that child's CUME record, but more than that, now it's part of I mentioned the data warehouse. This is simply an electronic cumulative record we have on students. Teachers can go in and see, for the students they have currently, their entire history on testing. And hopefully there's a consistent pattern in terms of student growth, but there are specific skill deficits that will often be determined in terms of what that child needs, whether they were on grade level or not, in reading or math. Is there an area of problem solving or measurement or some specific area within a subject that might be an issue? It also helps for teachers to evaluate their own performance when an entire group of students for the past year is performing low in one of those sub-skills. that should be used for professional development purpose and growth purposes. And the more we have teachers collaborating on the strategies they're using in the classroom to raise scores and sharing those strategies, the better those scores should get for all of us. But it's reflection on our own practice, but it's also a record that stays with that child and should be part of a continuous pattern.
But I'm guessing, what I'm asking though is if they take the test at the end of the year, it's an assessment, it shows the deficit, it shows those that are advanced. I understand about the correcting the teaching strategies throughout the year, but I'm saying if you take it at the end of the year, you see that a child has a deficit, what happens as it relates to that child based on that assessment and that deficit or that gain where they are placed for the next year? What intervention strategies are used? How is that information used? That's my question that I'm asking.
Well, if the child, unless there's a serious issue in terms of a summer school promotion type of issue, that's part of the review that goes on at the beginning of the next year, because there's time at the beginning of the year to reinforce skills and skill deficits that are out there, and to teachers get the results back when they come back in the fall before school starts. And one of the things we focus on is reviewing performance on your incoming students. They have data for the students that are going to be in their classroom in this school year, and we hope that they're using that data to get some idea of individual students and groups of students who have needs and how they can address that. But we have to do some review at the beginning of the year.
Okay, so there's not a systematic way to handle it. If a child has a deficit, they can still go into the same classroom with the same teacher knowing that there's a deficit, whereas another child may be advanced on
the one area that's been addressed by law is third grade reading deficits. There has to be an intervention in place, but it's not just based on a test score. It's based on performance that's been observed through the year. Honestly, we shouldn't have too many surprises on a TCAP test if we've been following the data all year long. We've hopefully already implemented strategies to address those. We predict from our DEA assessments with accuracy about 82 to 84% of the time, depending on the grade level and subject, how that child's going to do on a TCAP. So there usually aren't too many surprises in terms of skill deficits.
Okay, I guess the only reason I asked that question, though, but when I look at the African Americans and the Hispanic, there's a significant deficit, and it was based on the TCAP score, and it was like a 20 to 30 point spread in terms of math and English. So I guess my question would be, even though I understand what you're saying about the teaching strategies, but I'm saying if they move on to the next year, it's the end of the year, are they placed in the same classes all together, even though one has a significant deficit and the other one may be advanced? What happens to that child, and how are we using the data for that? I understand the part about correcting the teaching strategies throughout the year, but I'm saying they've taken the test, they come back, they're not proficient. What happens?
So we have the test data comes back right at the end of the year. It comes back hopefully before the teachers leave at the end of the year. Now, what are strategies that we're using to make a difference?
For the students that's gone on to the next grade.
One of them's been controversial, but we've started it, and that's a balanced calendar to shorten the summer. We know that students who are English learners particularly regress in the summer. The shorter the vacation, the better. We have a fall intersession and a spring intersession now to hopefully provide additional time for a lot of students. We purposefully started slow this fall. The fall break was the same number of days as it has been without an intersession, but we had about 6,000 children involved in 3 days of programming in the fall. In the spring, spring break goes to 2 weeks, and we've got a full week of intersession that we're planning now, and that comes before testing time. So we hope that's going to be a week where we can engage a large number of students in remediation going forward. It's a beginning. You know, it's not what I'd really like to see is a longer school year and longer days, but we can't afford that. It costs about Mr. Councilman Tiger, about $2 million a day to run the schools, to pay the staff. So that's a pretty costly thing, but we would like to see extended time going forward. This intercession time, I think, can make a difference for us. Another part of the answer, though, is that Dr. Changus has a staff of data coaches. Those data coaches' responsibilities are to work with school leaders and teachers. So they use that data over the summer to group, to arrange classes, to do their instructional planning for when kids come back in the fall.
Okay, and then the second question would be for those kids that are economically disadvantaged, what, I guess, what, I don't want to say programs, but what is being done to address that? Because we know that they're economically disadvantaged, and the students, they may not eat or whatever the case, but there's a gap there, and that they can't, the same, I guess, intervention strategies that you would use for children that are not economically disadvantaged, you couldn't use the same strategies in order to be successful. So what is being done? We know maybe missing breakfast, staying up all night, or parents can't read at home. Or so what are we doing to fill that gap?
That's a big answer, but because it has to be very broad. Now, I want you to think about the gaps in a different way in our district. We have gaps for economically disadvantaged children. That's about 75%, about 3 out of 4. We have gaps for minority students. We're a majority minority district. That's most of our children. We have gaps for English learners. We have 29% of all the English learners in the state. So it's not, we're not, when we talk about achievement gaps, we're talking about large numbers of students that we have to move. And so a lot of the response is, what are we doing across the district to raise achievement levels of, I'm not sure how many children, maybe 60,000 of our children, of the 81,000 in the district. So the strategies have to be very broad, and strategies, and I've named a couple, going to a balanced calendar and intercessions. Our Title I budget is used extensively for economically disadvantaged children. That's extra funds that's put into those schools to provide programs that are available for students on a daily basis. Our Race to the Top funds focus on many strategies to improve achievement of our students. So it's quite a big task. We have our reform strategies. We have a community engagement strategy. We know that for a lot of our economically disadvantaged children and for a lot of our minority populations, there's not an engagement that a level of engagement that we want to see. So we've got our community schools effort there to really look at broadening the engagement. Assistant Superintendent Tony Majors coordinates that program for us to really reach out and to get a lot more parents actively involved in their children's education. That's very important. So any number of strategies across the board, and we're looking at curricular and instructional improvements. Going to Common Core, I think, is a very good thing for us, but a big change for our teachers.
Okay,
by the way, there's another testing change when we go to Common Core. In another year, is it 2 years? We go to 2 years, we go to a different assessment again. So we'll have to adjust the standards and a new test again in 2 years.
Okay, thank you for your time, Dr. Register. But my question is, if there's a 1-year gap between a student and another student, would the 1 week of intercession help that student make the gains that they need, or a balance? If there's a 1 year, how long does it take a student?
We hope so. I'm searching for the right response to give to you. The other thing we have to do, though, is we have to differentiate instruction. You know, that's differentiating instruction means there is no group of children where every person in the classroom needs exactly the same thing. basic fundamental for us is helping our teachers learn how to differentiate instruction so that they know the needs of each child or group of children in the classroom, and so that they direct instruction toward those needs.
And if I could add one comment. And when I talk about the test scores coming back in the fall, I'm not just talking about our instructional practice, but specific deficits that a child may have that need to be addressed. And this differentiation means it should be a continuous process of assessing where that child is, what we call formative assessment. Teachers knowing what questions to ask, but finding additional time to address those skills. A lot of it is done through flexible grouping. If I've got 4 children who need help with measurement at the 4th grade in my classroom, they may go and we might find time, and even another teacher from another classroom working with them during additional time during the day that we find for intervention to work on their specific skill deficits. So we use that data all through the year. TCAP is important. It's a major test, but it shouldn't tell us something we hopefully haven't already identified through the course of our own assessment all year long. And our data coaches that Dr. Register mentioned have been getting first-rate training from one of the national experts in formative assessment that we're doing sessions in January with leadership teams to better assess where our children are on a day-to-day basis in terms of these new standards that we have.
Okay, and so when you assess them day to day, and if a child has a significant gap and they're just nowhere where they should have attained or grasped those concepts, I'm saying, how do you deal with them? Because they can't learn the new concepts because they never mastered the old ones in the differentiation. I mean, how does that work?
Well, we probably would need someone from our curriculum department to address the various strategies that are out there. But we're talking about additional resources, additional needs that child have. It may not be something that's going to change overnight. It may be something that we're going to have to address with, potentially with a special education need. Is it a deficit that the child has, or is it something instructional that we need to look at? But there's not a one-size-fits-all model here, and the reason that gap is so persistent is because the serious deficiencies take time. Hopefully, we're making progress on a day-to-day basis, but some of those gaps take time.
Okay, thank you for your time. I would also like a copy of that PowerPoint as well, and I would like maybe a follow-up, Chair Bettany, if they could come back and give us the PowerPoint ahead of time so we can kind of just look through it too as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Evans, thank you for your patience.
Quite all right. I've got about 3 questions and then a little shopping list of data, if that's okay. And instead of going back to the end of course exam, and if you want to flip to that chart, I kind of want to follow up a little bit on what Council Lady Gilmore was saying. I noticed in looking at the schools that serve my district that in a couple of cases more than 50% of the children are testing at basic or below basic. They're not meeting that proficient or advanced category, but the promotion rates at those schools are in the 98-99% range. How do you explain to a parent or even a taxpayer that these kids are obviously not meeting a basic standard, but are still being moved to the next grade?
Well, and Dr. Register may want to jump in on that. That's a tough question. I will say that the average Tennessee student is scoring in the basic range in most of these areas. What we've identified as basic would have been proficient or often advanced on the old test, and those students have deficits in certain areas based on these new standards, but they're still generally competitive with students across the state. Now, when you start talking about the lowest scoring students, that's another story. But the majority of those basic students are competitive. The challenge is that retention, the research shows, does not work. It's a continuous process of trying to to show that improvement over time and continue working on those areas. But one of the things we're doing right now is, I mentioned the formative assessment that we're doing, having a common expectation among teachers in terms of the rigor and the ability to evaluate student skills. If you look at the grades that are assigned to students in relation to test scores, there's inflation in those grades, and that's a big reason we see that movement.
So that's why the kids are being promoted, because the grades aren't syncing up quite with the...
That's part of it.
Okay.
But again, when there's not a history and going back for decades of retention showing that it works for students other than perhaps in the very early years, just holding them back is not necessarily going to fix that problem. But there is an issue on the evaluation of student work. One of the things we've done this year is to generate reports in the data warehouse that show teachers' grades in relation to the test scores on these benchmarks through the year to help us see if we're misaligned. But we're not alone. This is an issue in terms of grade inflation that's nationwide.
Okay. And at the...
Yeah, let me just say, I was an elementary principal for a number of years and dealt with promotions and retentions in bygone decades. But about the only place where you really see positive results is at the kindergarten, first grade level, where children are just obviously not mature to the point of being able to keep up, where the extra time really does make a difference. I think we really have to focus on helping students achieve, gain growth and keep them age appropriate to a large extent. I'm not one who doesn't believe in retention, but I think you have to have the conditions right, and the conditions are the maturity and age of the child. Some are younger than others. Whether parents agree and will help the process work. And the third one is, so what are you going to change? If you put a child a second year in a program where he wasn't successful the first year, you're likely going to get the same benefit. You're likely not going to see the change that you're really after. So differentiating, changing instruction, modifying instruction to accommodate those children behind is really the answer, not just giving them more time.
And are we doing any retention in the kindergarten, first grade? Sorry, this isn't one of my questions. This is a follow-up. Kindergarten, first grade, are we using that? Because, I know a child comes into kindergarten, and in most of our districts, you've got children who've been read to since they were born, and they recognize the alphabet, and they may even be early readers. And then you have children who are at the other end of the spectrum, and that's obviously a huge disparity on day one.
Absolutely. So that's the best justification there is for pre-K for everybody that needs it. I fully support that, and wish we had an extra first year to offer every child who needs that extra time to get ready to start kindergarten, because kindergarten readiness is a variable that can be really hard to overcome.
Okay. Going to the other end of the spectrum, the high school level, if a kid fails Algebra 1 or Algebra 2, they can't take it again, right? Am I understanding they go to the A+ lab, right?
Well, there are different strategies. They have to pass the test to get credit for the course, and they have to get credit. Some of those courses, like Algebra 1, are required for graduation, so they have to pass the course. Okay, so
so that's required for graduation, but they can get credit for graduation through the A+ lab, right? Isn't that what I read that on the website?
Well, that is a supplemental program, a remedial program, if you will. What's important to remember is that every student who gets credit for that course has to pass the test, the state test, and of course
the EOC test. Okay, so if they're going through U.S. history and the teacher has failed them because their grade just isn't up to snuff, they can retake the course through the A+ lab, but they still have to pass the EOC test. Am I understanding that correctly?
I don't know which of the courses are offered in the A+ lab off the top of my head. I'd have to give you an answer on that.
Okay.
But there are academic courses required for graduation, and students have to pass those courses to get credit. So if they qualify for graduation,
okay,
they have to have so many units for graduation, and they have to pass 4 math courses and 4 science courses and 4 English courses and 2 histories, I believe,
okay,
and others.
And so if I'm reading this website correctly, and I may be not reading it correctly, it was credit recovery was what it was talking about, and credit recovery, I guess, is your short credits, and you need to find a way to get them in order to graduate, right?
Right.
Okay, and that one of those strategies is the A+ lab. Okay, can we find in my shopping list here how many credits we gave out through, and hopefully I'm saying this right, through the A+ lab? How many of those were given out that way instead of the traditional method? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think I haven't looked at that data. Paul, do you know how that data is available? I'm not. The only hesitancy I have is that students may take A+ as supplemental help, but may get credit through the regular course in the final analysis.
Okay. All right. Well, whatever.
But we can give you some statistics on number of students that use A+.
Okay, that'd be very helpful. Then my last question before I ask for some data. The tribal group is something you've talked about. You talked about it at Rotary, Dr. Register. And I know they've been in and out of the classrooms, and your office was nice enough to send me sort of a summary report of some of their recommendations. Have they produced any, for the 30 schools they're working, 20 schools?
About 35.
35 schools they're working with. Have they produced any specific school reports or recommendations?
They have a report on each school that they work with, and I know that they're working on updating their reports to me now, to us now, to the district.
Okay. Could we get copies of what they've submitted to you thus far? And I'm interested in the schools in my district. I don't know if there's any, Dr. Register, to help things, I will send you an email tomorrow or tonight that details these requests, because this has been somewhat frenetic. So in terms of the tribal reports, that I think would be very interesting. You have really said some nice things about them, and clearly they have, I think, your confidence anyway. In terms of, go to there you are, the EOC. What is that grade? What scale is the EOC graded on?
Okay, well, this again is, what we're seeing here is percent of students reaching a cut score that's deemed proficient.
And is that in that 60%-ish general population range? It's
in that general range. Okay. I'd have to verify the most recent numbers, but yeah, it's in that range.
Okay. And it's, so could you just do the same exercise as with the TCAPs, the cut scores, and then how those scores are distributed?
Yes, yeah, we can do that.
Okay, and then in terms of something I've been asking for, because I'm very interested in it, and my parents are very interested in it, is the IB program. I know their average ACT is higher than the school at the general population at Hillsborough, but I'd love to see how those scores are distributed. I think they have like a average 23 or 24, but I'd like to see how those are distributed for those IB kids. And the same with ACT distribution. We talk about 21 and up and 21 and below, but it really would be nice to see how many kids are hitting 36, how many kids are hitting 35, 34, et cetera. I think that tells us a lot more than these averages, which are probably as frustrating for you as they are for me.
Yeah, and you would like that for all students at the school, or for the IB, for the ACT score?
The ACT scores for the IB,
distribution for those.
And then for the Hillsborough and Hillwood is the two schools I'm interested, the ACT distribution. I think the average is in the 18-19 range, but how were those scores distributed? And I'll send you an email tomorrow just so we get it. We don't run around in circles. But thank you so much for coming. This has been very, very informative, and I really appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore is waving at me from the side. She wants to ask another question. Should we let her do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Request for data. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine was, Dr. Register had spoke about diversity of faculty, and I know we had someone to come to the Minority Caucus to speak to us. So what I needed was how many, I guess, African Americans and Hispanics held supervisory positions prior to Dr. Register's arrival, and how many hold them now, and how many are in the system, just teaching as teachers. So that would be for those two groups. I would love to have that. And then I don't know if we track this or not, but I would like to know the students that end up receiving those Hope scholarships, how many are able to keep those? How many keep them as they go into college, and how many lose them? Do we track those that graduate from the Metro school system?
I don't think we currently have that data. We're working we're working on getting data on our graduates that will be part of our evaluation process in the future, but we have not been able to get that information in recent years. There's some efforts. There's a P20 system that's being developed right now in terms of those students going on to Tennessee colleges, for us to have that interface with them to know if our students are taking remedial courses, if they're doing well in terms of those scholarships. It's probably at least a year away before we.
I think that would be very, very, very helpful. Good indicator. And then I have one more question, and then I'm through. This is just also a request for data. It would be interesting to see how many changes have happened in the principalships of the lower performing schools versus compared to those that are the higher performing schools. How many turnovers we had in terms of principals and teachers, and how many of those teachers were in the category 1, 2, 3, or 4 of the low performing versus the higher performing schools. Thank you.
Well, I want to say this shows how much this council cares about education in Nashville, and I want to appreciate you guys being here. I want to thank Dr. Register. I want to thank Meredith Levy that is sitting in the back, and her daughter that is sitting through this, and also Rosie here who helped us set up this tonight. Thank you all, and Channel 3 as well for helping us share this.
Thank you for having us tonight.